If you're a home chef or a professional chef, you can guarantee you'll be chopping up a lot of vegetables in the kitchen. So what Japanese knives are going to help you slice and dice with skill and accuracy? These babies right here. This is a Peti, a Santoku, a Nikiri, and a Suitcase. Hey there, I'm Nathan, one of the knife nerds at Knifewear, where we sharpen your minds about Japanese knives. I love cooking with and eating vegetables, and I would certainly hope you do as well. There's so many varieties of veg. Some are hard, others are soft, some have tough skins, and others are just a pain in the ass. I'm looking at you, garlic. So in this video, I'll show you how each of these handmade Japanese knives will make your salads, mise en place, and stir fries a pleasure to chop up each time you're cooking up a masterpiece. So this first one is a Santoku. This is a shape of knife that most of us in the West are familiar with. The name translates to 3 virtues, meaning it can do meat, fish, and vegetables. And it's really just quite a handy knife. Nice and tall, easy to get into, bigger vegetables. And it's got a long enough blade that you can do a bit of slicing with it. I'm just going to show you first of all how the Santoku works. These are foods that duller knives have a lot of trouble with. You've got a tomato and a pepper there. Really the issue with these is you've got that hard skin that the knife has to bite into. And a duller knife isn't going to be able to do the job very well. So when you're using a Japanese knife, you want to grab it by the blade and just gently slide it through the food. You want to let the knife do the majority of the work. You'll notice how even with this mushy, not amazing grocery store tomato, this knife is doing an amazing job. Again, sliding the knife allows it to work better. And I like the Santoku because you can get into a bigger tomato like this and not get the knife lost in the food. And then if you want to get a really nice delicate cut, say you're making a bruschetta or a salsa, you can actually get that really nice fine dice without totally just mashing the tomato. Okay, so the pepper, right? Peppers are great, but they've got all these gnarly seeds in them, and usually you just cut it right down the middle, makes a mess, no fun, right? I got a different way to cut a pepper. We're gonna start by cutting off the ends. Take off the bottom end, like that, and take off the top end. And you wanna leave enough of this core intact that everything's still held together. Now, we're just gonna make a little incision into the side of the pepper. Just gently work our knife along and through the ribs. Now we can extract that core, get rid of that. We've got no seeds left on the pepper. Look how clean that is. And then you got this nice, beautiful flat sheet. And so again, if you want to make something, for a party, you want to make maybe a little relish or a little chutney, you can get these really nice little tiny bits of diced pepper. Normally with a pepper you'd have a cup shape. It's really awkward to cut and you can't get really nice presentation with it. But when you cut the pepper this way and you use a sharp knife, look at that. Now you'll notice I'm rocking the knife a little bit. I've been rocking knives for decades. As it comes down to the cutting board, it's sweeping a little bit. That's because this knife has a curved edge. If you just come down to the cutting board like this, it's not going to make a very full contact with the board, and you're going to end up with little pieces that are still attached. When you rock the knife, everything comes apart nice and beautifully like that. So that's how you cut with a more typical curved edge knife, but what if you want something that makes chopping a little bit easier? A Nikiri is designed exactly for that. Nikiri is a very traditional shape of Japanese kitchen knife. It's got a very flat edge, so when it meets the cutting board, it makes a mostly full contact with it so that you don't have to go back and detach little pieces of vegetable that are still stuck together. Let me show you how it works. So we're gonna dice up this onion. You'll notice I left a little bit of root in the back there. That's gonna hold everything together when I dice it. So because this Nikiri has that flat edge, we don't need to rock with it. We can just bring the knife straight down to the cutting board. So I'm just making these nice cuts down to the cutting board, but I'm leaving the back of the onion intact. If you want a finer dice, you can just sneak the Nikiri in midway, just to break up the layers a little bit. Looking at you, Chris Lord. And then you can slice across those cuts all the way down to the board. And look at that, I'm not rocking the knife, I'm just pushing, just sliding. And like I said earlier, sliding the knife works a lot better, but when you use a Nikiri, you don't need to get that rocking motion into it. I'll show you an even more extreme example. If you are in a real hurry, say you gotta make 10 liters of French onion soup in a rush, look at this, we got the core of the onion, we got half an onion. No problem, right? You could dice up 10 onions like that in a matter of minutes, and you're not gonna be spending all day laboring over the chopping, the prep part of your cooking. You can focus on just stewing that beautiful onion soup. So, say you wanted something even finer, right? Got a little carrot here, and obviously you can just do your basic carrot coins, but it's not the 1980s anymore, so we're gonna do something a little fancier than those. So we're gonna run the carrot straight across our cutting board. The knife's gonna intersect it at about 45 degrees. And we're just gonna take, basically like carrot coins, but they've got a more interesting shape. This is what's called the bias cut. Now, those are gonna be great in salads or in a stir fry. You know, it's small enough that it's gonna cook quickly, but it's not tiny, so you can still pick it up with a fork or with a pair of chopsticks. Say you do want your carrots a bit finer. You're putting it into a slaw or a salad. Just build a couple little stacks of your carrot bias cut there, and then just run your knife back across it. And now you've got this really fine little julienne of carrot. Again, no rocking with this Nikiri because that flat edge makes a clean contact with the cutting board every single time. But wait, there's more. You can get even finer with your carrots if you want to. Say you are making you know, a jam or a chutney or something where you want tiny little bits of your vegetable, and you don't want people to be, you know, gnawing on big chunks of carrot. Obviously, this is a terrible way to cut carrot for a stew, but it is really nice if you're, you know, trying to sneak some vegetables into burgers for your kids. It's great for mincing up garlic and anything that's got a really strong flavor to it. You could cut radishes like this and then sprinkle them into a salad. And although it may seem extreme, it's a great way to practice your knife skills. And it is nice to know that when you do need this size of vegetable, a sharp knife is gonna do it for you. So what if you wanna work with something a little bit longer? You know, the Santoku, the Nikiri, those are great shapes, especially if you're just making dinner for two. But if you gotta prep a big meal, or you're like me and you got big hands, maybe you used to work in a professional kitchen, you might want a bigger knife. That's where a 210 or even 240 Suitcase comes in. This guy is one of my favorite shapes. Reason is, it's a lot like the Gyuto, the French chef's knife that you see a lot of folks using, but it's kind of a hybrid between that and a Nikiri. So you have that nice kind of curving blade that you can rock when you want to, but you also have the height and some of the flatness of a Nikiri. So when you make these clean cuts down to the board, you still get really clean separation of your vegetables. Let me show you. I'm gonna shred up a little radicchio here. You know, radicchio is a really underrated vegetable here in the West. You don't see a lot of people using it, but it's got a beautiful bitter flavor to it. It's really nice to offset something really sweet. So say you're making a nice slaw, you could throw some apple in there for sweetness, but you could also sneak some radicchio in to balance out the sweetness of the apple and mayonnaise. And look at that. Again, I'm not rocking my knife, I'm just coming straight down, but all of that radicchio has been cleanly separated. There's no strands connected to each other. And so then you've got this beautiful, beautiful vegetable. You could build a little nest out of here and, you know, throw some poached tuna in there if you wanted to, or again, you could just sneak that right into a salad for a little kick of bitterness. I'm a big fan of radicchio, and if you need something to shred a lot of it or shred a lot of cabbage, a Suitcase is a really great way to do that. Now earlier I mentioned garlic, my nemesis. Don't get me wrong, I love garlic. I eat horrendous amounts of garlic, possibly an ungodly amount of garlic, but it's a pain. Because I use a lot of garlic, I gotta peel a lot of garlic, and that can get to be a nightmare. So my favorite way to handle garlic is to smash it up and then peel it, and it becomes much easier. Now, you can do it with a frying pan, all that sort of thing if you want to, but my knife is always in my hand, and so I prefer to use my knife to smash garlic. Now, a common mistake I see a lot of our customers making, and this is totally understandable, because we're used to rigid European knives, is you stick your knife down like that and you give it a whack. But then the knife comes back for sharpening and it's all bent off to one side. So instead, we're gonna bring our garlic over to the edge of the cutting board, and we're gonna make sure our knife is parallel to the cutting board, and we're not even gonna hit it. We're just gonna put our body weight on it, just lean on it. Look at that. Knife still straight, garlic, easy to peel. And then, you know, if you want to finely shave it, you know, we've all seen that scene in Goodfellas. You don't need a razor blade, you just need a razor sharp Japanese kitchen knife. Look at that. That's going to be a beautiful addition to your pasta sauce. If you do want to mince it, you can go over it again, rough chop it a little more, right? But don't hammer into it. You know, you don't need any of this really aggressive motion. Just gently run the knife over it, right? Just really gentle back and forth. Just nice and easy like that. Now personally, I'm more comfortable with a larger chef's knife for most jobs, even some of those really precision jobs like handling garlic. Not everybody is, and that's totally cool. You know, when I see my grandmother in the kitchen, she's usually using something small like this, a petty knife. If you're more comfortable with a small knife, just grab yourself a good petty. That might be a great first Japanese knife, and then you can upgrade to a Santoku or a Gyuto later. So this is a Fujimoto Nishiji 135mm petty. It's a nice size because it's small enough to use in your hand for real precision jobs, you know, like cleaning up some Brussels sprouts here. But it's big enough that if you want to do a bit of work on the cutting board, you can still get enough weight behind it. It's not one of those tiny little 80mm paring knives that you can't do anything with, but even, you know, for smaller hands, it is small enough that you can work in your hand. You can even use it for eyeing out potatoes, like so. I'm not a big fan of that little tool that comes on most potato peelers, so I use a paring knife instead. And rather than removing a whole bunch of it, I just cut out a little bit of the eye there. Look at that. And you may think this size knife is limited, and it is, because it doesn't really give you the knuckle clearance that you'd want for a lot of big chopping jobs. But say I want to shred up these Brussels sprouts and throw them in with my radicchio in the slaw. Look at that. I just raise my hand up a little bit, grip the knife by the blade, and I work more with the front of the knife, so I'm not running my hand into the cutting board. All right? Nice and easy. Okay, the butternut squash. This one vegetable gives, I think, more trouble to home cooks than pretty much any other vegetable out there. We get questions, I would say daily in Knifewear stores about, will this knife cut a butternut squash? And the answer is yes, right? Maybe the tiny little paring knife, the petty knife, not so much, but anything as big as a Santoku or bigger will handle it no problem. Step one, remove these woody stems. As you probably know, Japanese knives are made from much harder steel. And if I try to cut right through this, I'm probably gonna chip this knife. It's more common than you would think. So just bring your knife back from the stem a little bit and just gently slice through, right? Nice and clean, no wood, no chip in the knife. Same on the other side. This little guy can be deceptive. And again, butternut squash is a dense vegetable. This is where most people struggle, is they don't necessarily have the strength to push through the squash. Well, when you have a thin, sharp knife like this, you just start at the tip and you just gently push down and slide through. And I'm barely pushing here. I'm letting the knife do most of the work. You'll notice it's not flying through, but that's okay. I can just pull my knife back and up a little bit and just keep going. And I used barely any strength there to take that off. Now, here's the important thing. We now have 2 flat spots on either end of our squash, and this is really important. If you try to cut a round rolly object like this without a flat spot, it's going to roll around, and the knife is going to go somewhere you don't want it to, possibly your hand. It's a bad thing. So set it on one of the flat spots. It's going to be much easier to cut. If you want to cut it in half first, cut a little flat spot on the side here. Don't be afraid to. If you're going to cut all the way down through the middle for whatever reason, make sure you have a flat spot on the bottom. And so all we're going to do here is we're going to start our knife at the top, then we're going to pull this hand away. We don't want to cut our hand. And we're just going to gently push down. If the knife requires all of the strength in your body to go through, stop and approach it from a different angle. You never want to be applying an inordinate amount of force because you're going to end up hurting yourself. Just gently rock the knife down through the squash, and there we go. So there you have it. These knives all have special functions in the kitchen when it comes to prep and even presentation. It's fun to have a selection of knives you can choose from that will make specific tasks more pleasurable and effective. Having a variety of beautiful tools gets me more excited to cook, and it helps get my creative juices flowing. But vegetables aren't the only foods you'll be preparing in the kitchen. Are there specialty meat knives? Yes, indeed. Check out this next video to learn about the essential Japanese meat knives for your kitchen.